to some people, it may seem boring, right? Okay, I can speed up this invoice payment from 2 days into 30 seconds. Okay, that doesn't sound like that exciting. Or I can reduce this investment fees from like 50 basis points to 5 basis points, right? But what this financial infrastructure does is it acts as a kind of building blocks for the whole world, for the whole society. And so I think that just in the same way that the internet has dramatically changed the world and it's given a lot of opportunities to a lot of people, I believe that blockchain technology will do that as well. And so I feel that the fiat and off-ramp problem is the most meaty, difficult problem that we could have solved in that. And it kind of suited our skill sets.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome everyone to another episode of Taka Talks. We have with us Sami Start. This is the easiest name I've had to say in, I don't know, since we started this podcast, I think. Sami Start is the co-founder and CEO of Transak, a company that provides developer tools for apps to onboard users from fiat to crypto. Now, I want to say it's kind of like a Stripe for crypto on-ramp. Okay. Prior to this role, Sami has worked as a software engineer at Smarkets, a developer at Optiva, and as a technology evaluation executive at STFC. Sami holds a Bachelor of Science in Physics from Imperial College London and a Master's in Computer Science from UCL.
Yeah.
So thank you, Sami. Welcome to the show. And that was the, I guess, official biography. Tell us the unofficial story.
Okay, the unofficial story. Well, yeah, firstly, assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for having me. And it's really good to chat with you guys. I love chatting with you in Riyadh, and it's nice to chat again. So a little bit about me. So firstly, I'm half Saudi Arabian and I'm half English. My mom is from Saudi Arabia, and my dad is from England. I was born in London, although I've spent a good amount of time in the Middle East and in Saudi. And I grew up in London. I studied physics and computer science degrees, so quite a technical background. And then I was working in high frequency trading, as Sharon said, in Optiva. And then I worked in a B2C fintech company called Smarkets. And at Smarkets, I got very much exposed to this onboarding problem, which was, as a fintech company, I would say most fintech companies, they spend around half of their resources or more in onboarding their users. Onboarding means how can you KYC the user? How can you get their money deposited into your platform? Okay. And then the rest of the business is spent doing the actual bread and butter of what it is you're doing, whether that's an investment product or whether that's an exchange or whether that's mortgage or something like that. And so I saw this was a very, very big problem. So I started as an entrepreneur and I was trying to solve this onboarding problem. Like, how can you make a single integration that allows a user to onboard into any app and not have to keep doing that process over and over again? And then as a business, how can you onboard your users without having to put so much resource into that, right? So like when I was at Smarkets, we had around half of the team was devoted into doing the KYC, integrating all these different providers, integrating all these different payment methods, like cards, like PayPal, like e-wallets. And so I was starting working on that as an entrepreneur. And at the same time, I was kind of into Ethereum and into smart contracts. So I had started writing smart contracts and deploying them. And I had this and this was just as a hobby, kind of like on the side, right? And I had this crazy moment where I wrote a smart contract, just a simple ERC20 token. And I deployed this token on the Ethereum network. And my brain was trying to understand, like, where is this code running? Okay. Normally when you run a code, it's running on a server, right? Like, I can show you like a physical server. Okay, this code is running on this server, or it's running in AWS in some data center somewhere. With Ethereum and the smart contract, I was like, where is this running? And the answer was kind of like everywhere and nowhere. It was like this magical new internet. And when I dug more deeply into that, I became convinced that this is like the next internet. This is a very, very big thing, and that all applications will be run on this platform in the future. And so, as an entrepreneur, I kind of pivoted into not just how can you onboard someone into a financial app, but how can you onboard someone into a blockchain app that involves money. I saw this was like the biggest problem. And the way I started this journey, this was in the start of 2019 when I kind of pivoted in this direction. The very first thing I did is I started speaking with real users and real businesses. And I asked them, like for the businesses, I asked them, how do you onboard your crypto users? And they say, oh, we have this long list of items. You have to go and download a wallet. You have to go to an exchange, do the KYC, buy the crypto, transfer it out to your wallet. Very, very, and it was very clunky. It was even like just some bullet points, right? And you have to send your user to a third party website. So I was like, okay, this is a real problem. And then I spoke with some users, and there were people who are real users of real dApps. Like I spoke with someone who was a construction worker in, I think, Texas. Okay, so like a normal non-technical person, they were playing Axie Infinity, which is a game on the blockchain, and they're also kind of struggling with these same problems. So I identified, okay, this is a real problem, and this is a market I think is going to become huge, right? This is going to be like the new internet. And so I just put 100% of my energy into solving this problem. And then I met my co-founder Yeshu later on that year. So Yeshu, he's from India, and he started several companies before. His last company, he exited that. He sold it to a European exchange, and went on to be a CTO there. And then he left, and we kind of ended up meeting up in a conference, a crypto conference. And then very quickly we kind of decided, okay, he was working on something kind of similar, and we decided, okay, we're going to work together. We got accepted into an accelerator program from Consensus, and we went to New York from that. And then me and Yeshu, we moved into an apartment together. We were basically working like 24/7. Yeshu was coding all day. I was doing customer calls, handling the business side. And then we launched our product, and from there we had a lot of success very quickly. Like the product kind of came up very, very quickly, and then COVID happened. So we kind of went back to our homes, and we built the whole company remotely, and the rest is history from there.
That's an amazing story, by the way. I'm
Yeah.
gonna ask you, take a step back, and I want to know, how did you end up in Miami? So you already said you have a mixed parentage, but you went to school in London. How did you end up going to Miami, and why?
So during COVID, I was kind of working between London, which is where my family is from, and New York, and Miami. Kind of, I was between those places for a mixture of personal reasons, and then we eventually ended up settling in Miami, because of a few reasons. Like, firstly, I'm very excited by the US market. I think that it's the biggest market in the world, and it's somewhere where I wanted to be based for Transak, in terms of being able to be a global company. You know, I saw like a lot of big ambition coming in the US. A lot of our team is based outside of the US. You know, so we kind of run operations, and a lot of people out of India, and we have people in Europe, and we still have people in London. But I was very excited about the US as a kind of potential place to build a global company, and I still am. And then Miami, I was very interested in Miami because I think that it's very much trending upwards as a city. It has a great crypto scene, it has a great fintech scene, and I see it as a great hub for Transact to be headquartered and to build a global company.
Cool. You know, you are playing in a very regulated space, right? And obviously, the SEC is in the news all the time. They're issuing Wells notices to Coinbase. They're doing Wells notices to,
Yeah.
I think, Robinhood. How are you feeling at this moment?
So for us, regulation. is actually a big part of what we do. We see it as like a big part of the value of what Transak is. So Transak has built entities all over the world. We've got licenses in several entities all over the world. We're in UK, Europe, India, US, and we've set up a bunch of other entities that we're going to be announcing over the next few months as well. And this is like a big part of our value prop as a company. It's a big part of our intellectual property. And it's not just the entities and the licenses, but it's also all of the small things that you do to operate in those countries. There's lots of small regulations that you need to abide by. And so I see this as kind of an opportunity for us, and I think this is also why companies like to work with Transak, is because they see us as a high trust, high reliability infrastructure that puts compliance first. And we take these things very seriously. And every single thing we do in every country is very well documented and has a very clear compliance narrative for why we do it. Having said that, there are always risks in such a heavily, fast evolving space. And we try to navigate those risks in real time. But yeah, I mean, specifically in the US and the world notices, I think there's a lot of room for improvement of how they're doing things in the US. But, overall, we do a lot of business in the US, and we don't have any major problems here.
So you come from a high frequency trading background, and which is Wall Street, and it's these big players with lots of money, and they're like the milliseconds count in that industry, but it's incredibly competitive. And you discover this whole new internet, like you said. Why would you leave that career, high profile trading career, lots of money involved, to come into this very nascent space?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, right? Because you can make a lot of money in high frequency trading, and it's also pretty fun, right? It's like a lot of action and a lot of excitement, and I think when I was in my 20s, thinking about what I really wanted to do, I kind of had a lot of deep philosophical meaning of life type thoughts, and I really wanted to do something that was useful for the world, that had some kind of impact on the world. And I think making money and having fun and having a good lifestyle only brought me so far in terms of my fulfillment. And I felt that doing what I'm doing now with Transak is the best use of my time, of how I can be most useful to the world. And that kind of brings me another level of fulfillment and joy. I believe that the impact of what we're doing is that if you imagine a future where blockchain is the back end of all financial apps, gaming apps, everything becomes financially connected, and Transak is powering that. And so Transak makes it accessible for any normal user to use any of these apps. Now what you have is that these apps are available 24/7 globally, right? So you can access the same financial products if you're in a poor developing country as you can if you're in the United States or in UK. And so, having access to financial products, even though
We'll be right back after the break.
Taka Talks brings you stories from around the world that will help you understand how crypto and Islamic finance can change our lives for the better. Subscribe and follow to keep learning.
even though to some people it may seem boring, right? Okay, I can speed up this invoice payment from 2 days into 30 seconds. Okay, that doesn't sound like that exciting. Or I can reduce this investment fees from like 50 basis points to 5 basis points, right? But what this financial infrastructure does is it acts as a kind of building blocks for the whole world, for the whole society. And so I think that just in the same way that the internet has dramatically changed the world, and it's given a lot of opportunities to a lot of people. I believe that blockchain technology will do that as well. And so I feel that the fiat on off-ramp problem is the most meaty, difficult problem that we could have solved in that. And it kind of suited our skill sets as a team. And so, I feel very, very confident that this is the right problem that we need to solve.
I 100% agree with you, because literally that is the main problem that we face even in our own journey, right? Whether it's our our yield generation and savings app, or our insurance app, it's always about, people love the value proposition and then they get stuck when they're trying to on ramp. So I 100% agree with you, and think what you guys are doing is fantastic, and incredibly important. But maybe the deeper question is, why is this important for the world? Why is this new money, in your opinion, such a game changer for the world? And coming from a perspective where you work closely with regulators, how do you see them reacting to the fact that, I would say, the central banks are increasingly losing control over what they fought very hard to gain control over, i.e., the the money supply?
Well, I'll start with maybe a few more practical use cases. Okay, so let's not think anything crazy and philosophical, right? Let's just take like a normal financial app and let's put blockchain plumbing in the back end. Okay, let's say you want to invest in in an investment product. Okay, so the first thing is that you'll be able to do that 24/7. So if you want to invest at 3 a.m. on a Sunday, you can do that, and it will settle instantly on the blockchain. The next thing is that it's cross-border. So anyone in any country can settle a transaction with anyone in any other country instantly, the same as if they're in the same country. The third thing is these apps now become interconnected, kind of like money Legos. So you have all of these small financial primitives like Uniswap, like a DEX, like some yield earning product, and you can kind of chain them together. Okay, so you have let's say you have some B2B invoicing software, and you can send money from one company to another to pay some invoice. Let's say you're paying some contractor for some software development. Now, as soon as that money hits the bank account of that other company, let's say in India, that can automatically be put into it could be swapped into another chain, and then it can be automatically put into a yield earning treasury product on chain, right? And all of that stuff can be automated. So what you end up with is businesses and individuals whose lives are highly automated in a financial sense, right? The kind of back end of your finances is run on these smart contracts, and it's highly automated. That's like a much more practical and pragmatic approach. Now, from a more philosophical, high-level approach, you're talking about decentralization. So you're talking about no central government or central bank or anyone controls the money that you have, which is maybe less of a short-term thing that can help your life, but as we've seen from the failure of many banks, in mass inflation in different countries, that can affect your life for sure. It's also self-sovereign. So you kind of have custody of your own assets. You hold the keys for that stuff. With a bank, if your bank were to hypothetically say that you have 0 reals or $0 or whatever, right? They probably wouldn't do that, but if they wanted to, they could, right? With your cryptocurrency, no one else can do that. It's controlled by an algorithm, not by any one person. So from a philosophical point of view, it kind of brings us towards a future where it's more distributed, more decentralized, and especially when you have AI that's becoming so powerful, governments that are becoming so powerful, that's maybe not such a bad thing.
Yeah, no, you're right. And you said the banks probably won't do that, but in lots of countries around the world, some form of that has happened. Lebanon, namely, where they have held back giving people their money. So let's switch gears a little bit. You guys have done such an amazing job. In about 5 years, you've built up this beautiful business to, I believe the last thing I read was 1 billion of, was it gross transaction value, which is amazing. You are now cash flow positive. Tell me a little bit about what that journey was like. What was the greatest challenge you faced building Transak?
I would say this comes into three major phases. So the first phase was actually getting a banking infrastructure in place, which for any other company is quite easy. But for a crypto company, getting bank accounts where you can process these kind of transactions, having the licensing in place, takes time. So most startups, let's say you wanted to build a SaaS product as like an email client, you can just go on your computer and you can write some code and you can ship that thing. With what we're doing, it took us over a year to get our first actual bank account live. And then, so that was definitely the first major issue. And that's continued to be a big part of what we do as a company. So as we've scaled, we now have more than 10 different entities in 7 countries. We have bank accounts all over the world. We have licenses all over the world. We keep investing more and more into that and building this global presence. The second thing is, so we never struggled with product market fit. Okay, a lot of companies, they struggle because they just build something that no one really wants or uses. And that's quite a bleak, tough way to go, right? Where you're just waiting for people to want to use your product. Actually, when me and Yeshu like first shipped the product, people kind of started using it immediately. So, we got some people from our office, they've tried buying crypto. And then I remember we had a connection in Slack where we would get a message every time someone placed an order. And back in those days, our product was like quite manual. There was a lot of manual operations behind what we did. These days, it's very automated. We can handle hundreds of thousands of transactions a day without much human intervention. But back in those days, we would see every transaction and we would respond to it. So within like a few weeks, we started getting a lot of transactions from names and people that we didn't recognize. Then we kind of made some announcements at East Denver in 2020. And then, it started blowing up. People started using it. And very quickly, the problem that we had wasn't like, can we make something that people want? The problem was, how do we deal with all of these orders? So
Good problem to have.
Yeah, it was a good problem to have. We would work like all day, every day. And keep in mind that, as a CEO, I'd be doing like legal things, I'd be doing accounting things, I'd be doing product things, like all these kind of things. And then I would finish off my day with like 3 hours of customer support, and then I would close my laptop and go to sleep, So that was an extremely intense period of both of our lives where we were just like trying to keep focusing our attention on how can we scale this, how can we meet all of this demand. And I would say we've done a good job of that now. Like our obviously having processed $1 billion of transaction volume, that scaled to quite a high degree. And now the third phase we're in, which is again like a nice problem to have, is we're thinking about what's next and what's the future. And we feel like we've just gotten started. So we're kind of in this nice position where we have this revenue streams, we have this great team, we have this great business, and how can we really go into the future and make this thing happen?
So I would say that your core customer, quote unquote, are developers, right? Now, would you agree?
Well, it's kind of B2B2C. So kind of like PayPal, right? PayPal, they get integrated into different merchant websites, but then consumers also know and use the PayPal brand. It's kind of the same with Transak. So most of our distribution, most of our sales is in like B2B sales to developers who integrate us. So people like MetaMask, Trust Wallet, Ledger, we will get them to integrate the Transak software. But then we also have a brand with users and we also do customer support for users as well. So we have like a consumer facing presence. Yeah.
Right. So even more complicated than I imagine. So two things.
Yeah.
Number one, how did you go about building the initial developer user base? And what kind of programs you guys have in currently that exist to support your developer user base? And then the other thing is then how do you go about building a brand in Web3 where it's not like traditional brand building where you can just buy a bunch of ads? As a matter of fact, you pretty much get blocked all the time you try to advertise if you're a
Right.
Web3 crypto company.
Right. So in terms of building out the developer integrations, firstly, me and Yeshu are both technical co-founders. We've both written a lot of code. We understand how APIs work, and so firstly, the very first version of Transak was just B2C. We just sold crypto from our own website. So one of our product philosophies in Transak is don't try to build everything with all the bells and whistles at once. Try to build like the minimal version and then kind of iterate from there. So you can think of this like you build a skateboard, then the skateboard gets you from A to B, then you build a bicycle, then you build a motorbike, and then you build a car, and then you build the Lamborghini. Okay, and you don't try to build the Lamborghini from day one. So for us, the skateboard was like, here's a consumer-facing app where you can buy crypto, and we started doing millions of dollars of volume through that. Then the next step was like, how can we get this integrated into another app, right? Which was the point of Transak all along. Is like someone wants to buy crypto in that app in order to onboard into that app. So for that, what we did is we basically just sat with people. Like when we were in New York, we would just sit with another team. I remember very clearly there was a company called Idle Finance. They're friends of ours, and we would sit with them and we would help them to integrate it into their product, and we would just provide the APIs that they needed in order to do that, right? And after a few weeks of iteration, we kind of got something that they were happy with, and it was like a very bespoke, hands-on white glove service for them. And then we did that with a few more customers, and then eventually that kind of got scale, and then from there, we built out a lot of documentation, and then we built out a sales team around that, because after you do 10, 20 sales, the motion looks very similar, right? You have these very repeatable steps. Okay, go to this documentation, integrate in this way. There's these FAQs, do this compliance processes. So we kind of built that into a repeatable go-to-market motion. We built out a sales team around that, and then the final thing that we did is, and this is I think quite unique to Transak, is that we heavily automated every step of that sales cycle. So we have a lot of automations that help both our internal teams and external people to get through every stage of the sales funnel, and then we just kind of scaled that sales motion. So now we have more than 350 active applications on Transak, including most of the big marquee names you can think of in the space, like Coinbase Wallet, like Decentraland, like Immutable X.
Question I would like to ask before Sharon goes on and with another question.
Yeah.
Since you are doing something very exciting and and you have cracked the code, I would say, into product market fit and build a product that from the get-go was a needed product, and I'm sure that this is only going to go up in that way. So while you're building those fantastic products, very focused on what you do, and for the sake of our Web3 audience who are looking for also to step in and build their own future, you would have come across few ideas and you're like, oh man, we need this as well, and I can do it, but we need that as well, and we can do it. As we know, the Web3 community is lacking enough of the talent, putting resources to execute. So what are a few things that you could give some entrepreneur listening, Web3 entrepreneur, saying, hey, if I had time, I would think about that idea or that ideas to help our community grow together. If you may share.
So one thing that I'm very excited about at the moment is, well, it's going to sound obvious, but building financial applications on the blockchain. And we're seeing a lot of what's called RWA applications, which means like real world asset apps. So these are something where it takes a normal thing from the real world, let's say a property or a investment product, like let's say a stock, or a loan, or anything that exists in the real world already in a Web2 way, and it puts it on chain, and it uses stablecoin settlement under the hood for that. So still using all of the traditional compliance legalities, everything like that. And what I like about this is that you're not trying to reinvent finance. It's kind of like a pragmatic approach to take an existing financial product and just make it better, and so I think that building user-facing apps, and the same applies for other types of apps as well. Like let's say games, you have a game on the blockchain where the items are stored as NFTs, or the currency in the game is stored as cryptocurrency. What I'm very excited about is user-facing applications that are pragmatic about using the benefits of blockchain technology, but trying to package that in a way that is familiar and normal to a normal person, right? So you can take a normal person on the street, you can show them this app, and they can very clearly understand the value proposition of this application, right? Whether the value proposition is I'm going to invest and I'm going to earn this amount of return on my investment with this risk, or I'm going to play this game and it's going to be fun, and I can also use my items and trade them as NFTs. Okay. Or I'm going to be able to invest in this property in Spain, and I wouldn't have access to that financial product otherwise, and I can do that with a very easy settlement. So the first part is creating consumer-facing apps that are usable and useful to people. Okay, people should not forget this. The apps should be useful. It shouldn't just be something that you want to build. The second part of building the user-facing app is that you should really look at all of the infrastructure that's available, because the space is moving so fast, right? In traditional industry, you have to refresh your knowledge every 1 or 2 years. In the crypto industry, you have to refresh your knowledge every 1 or 2 weeks, because every week someone's shipping some new infrastructure, some product. There's some new scaling solution. There's some new way of paying gas fees, or there's some new way of signing in with a wallet. So I would say like build user-facing apps that are useful to people, and also that use the forefront of existing infrastructure and technology. Like don't try to recreate everything yourself. Try to look what's available out there. That's if you're building a user-facing app. If you're building on the B2B side, like maybe more infrastructure tools, then there's a ton of really interesting problems to solve out there. Like I think the wallets problem is still not really solved. The identity stuff is not really solved. Layer 2's scaling, cross-chain bridging, all of that stuff is not really solved, or at least there's a lot of work to do there still. So I think there's interesting opportunities both on user-facing applications and on like B2B infrastructure.
How do you see the whole layer 2 thing going? Because I'm getting so confused. Every couple of days, I meet somebody who's building a new layer 2. I mean, there are all kinds of different variations of this. There's or even layer 1s for that matter. How do you see this eventually? Is it going to be a winner take all type of thing, or are they going to coexist? I find it really hard to imagine a world where you're going to have to bridge and swap a bazillion tokens just to get through any a regular transaction. So where's this going?
Yeah, it is confusing. I think One thing is that we're seeing like a kind of competition for who's going to be the layer one, and you know, Ethereum is obviously like a very, very strong contender. They have a very big network, and with a big network comes a lot of security, right? The bigger your blockchain, the more secure it is. People are also looking at Bitcoin as a layer one for doing apps, right? People are building ordinals, they're building like all kinds of things on Bitcoin now, and they're using Bitcoin as a underlying security protocol for layer twos. Now, on the layer two side, you have different types of layer twos. Some of them really, and side chains. So some of them really prioritize usability and transaction speed. And then some of them really prioritize security and decentralization. And then some of them do kind of a good job on both, and they're somewhere in between. So I think that you have trade-offs on those two things, right? And that can also come into effect when you're bridging things, right? Like something that's more secure, it might take longer to bridge from one chain to another. Now, the reason why you have so many chains, I actually think it kind of makes sense because let's say you're an application and you get a lot of users. You may want to capitalize on those users by having your own app chain. And having your own app chain actually allows you to capitalize on the gas fees and the usage of that network, right? Like I've seen some apps that kick off and they're running on some other layer two, and they end up being like more than 99% of the traffic of that layer two. And they're like, why don't we just make our own app chain? So yeah, I think that it is a very, very complex technical problem that needs to be abstracted into a very simple user experience. And I don't think that users should know that they're using different chains. I think that it should just be like seamless bridging and swapping, and you should just see everything as like one user experience.
Yeah,
But yeah, I
see,
agree.
that's the thing, right? Because every layer two, well, many of them has their own native token. So in order for you to use that layer two, you need that native token. So you almost have no choice but to involve the user in the process, because they're like, okay, if they're gonna transact, they're gonna have to swap, they're gonna have to bridge, and this is the part where I'm like, this is crazy. This is so. I don't know how many different tokens, versions of ETH, for example,
Yeah.
just because there's so many layer twos that I'm interacting with.
Yeah. So what I imagine for that is probably a future where the gas fees are paid for using some kind of account abstraction. So you don't need to necessarily own all those different tokens. And then either like the app would pay for the gas fees, so you just don't have to worry about it at all. Like it would just be sponsored by the app. Or you'd even be able to pay for the gas fees using like stable coins or some other token. And using account abstraction, that's kind of possible. And then I also imagine that there'll be really strong cross-chain bridging infrastructure projects like LeFi and some of the other ones. And so you won't even really have to know that you're on a certain chain or not, because you'll just kind of like deposit to that app, and then in the background they'll do all of the cross-chain swapping, and then the gas fees will also be abstracted away from you. So I agree there's a lot of problems. I am optimistic that developer tooling will emerge that will make it such that the users don't even know that that's happening. It's just abstracted away.
Yeah, and they shouldn't actually. If we want to attract the other 99% of the community, they just want to know how to click and get served, and that's all. But
Right.
I will also ask you a question. You've been in an ecosystem. I guess mashallah, you guys have been raising a couple of rounds of funding,
Yeah.
and also to attract users. So how was your strategy in terms of first of all, do you have a token? Did you launch a token? And how was if you want to share with us and the audience how the token is doing, and what do you see, especially with the bull market around the corner?
So firstly, we don't have a token. I'm not saying we've never spoken about it or thought about it. We haven't done a token until now. I would say a big part of that is because a lot of what Transak does is quite centralized. And I actually think that we're like we should be like the last centralized company, because by definition we're kind of bridging people between centralized systems and decentralized systems. So we have a lot of bank accounts, we have a lot of compliance infrastructure, we report to the regulators for a lot of stuff. So a lot of what we do looks like a normal Web2 fintech company. We are like, our DNA is very crypto native, and we integrate with a lot of blockchains, and we understand crypto very well, but we're also very centralized in what we do. And so that's a big part of why we haven't released a token, is that we feel that it would compromise on a lot of our banking relationships and a lot of the way we do stuff in the centralized world. Having said that, like, as our product evolves and becomes more complex, the fiat on off ramp stuff and the connections to the centralized system kind of becomes like a base. Okay, that's like the core skeleton of like what we're building. But we're now starting to build more and more stuff on top of that, right? So for example, now we've got like our NFT checkout product, where a user can go from fiat into an NFT, and we can do very complex NFT purchases. So we can do primary and secondary markets. We can batch sale NFTs, so you can buy like 10 NFTs at once. So we've built like some good Web3 infrastructure around this product. We also have Transak One, where you can invest in a smart contract. So as we're starting to build out more of these value-added services on top of fiat on-ramp, the possibility of a token becomes like more interesting. But we definitely don't have any immediate plans for a token.
Great. I'm sure some jokers could have already fake it as they did with Takadao. we every week we see a Takadao token, even though we never launch a token as well. So it's kind of funny, because we also we try to be very conservative in the sense of creating or building a community. Strong community that will support the token launch, and not pull back and try to make a quick win in the token. And hence we decided not to yet launch a token as well.
So one fun thing is we have a Telegram group, so people often ask when token on the Telegram group, probably for you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A bit of the gamblers who are trying to pump and dump there.
So what would be also interesting, if you might share maybe a story with this, because when we talk to some of our investors and also future investors, of course, they always have this side contract with a potential, a token launch. And we have a very different type of people really trying to double down on the bull market, looking for opportunities in a token where we push. And people who are more conservative and say, hey, we want equity, and we want, we don't mind having a side contract on the token. So if you can share, your feeling when you're talking to people, and how you how you dodge the question as like, what do you want from us, and like, it's interesting to hear your point of view with these two circles, because you survive and build a company during the bear market. I mean, prior to the bear market, now we're going back to the bull market. And you see this, I will call them burger story, of the VC, flip and flop, they change their mind I love them, one day is this, the next day is that. So lovely to hear some of your story on that level.
So firstly, I'm pro tokens. Okay. And within something that's legal and compliant and ethical, I'm pro tokens. I think that tokens are necessary for Web3 to happen. You can't have Web3 without tokens, because the whole point of Web3 is that you're creating this kind of public goods infrastructure that's tokenized and community owned and decentralized. And the tokenomics is a necessary thing in order to have that decentralization. Having said that, I think that one should be careful when making a token. You need to think firstly, like, is this compliant? You have to look at all of the laws in different countries, and the Howey test, and is this a security, and like all this kind of stuff. And if it does fail the Howey test, then what are you going to do about that? And how are you going to mitigate that? And then I think another thing is there's the letter of the law, which is like, are you breaking the law? And then there's the spirit of the law, which is like, are you really doing the right thing for your community? Are you doing the right thing for your users, for your token holders? So I think you have to obey the law, but you also have to, when you make a token, you're making a commitment to your community that you're going to deliver some value for the token holders. So for me, I'm very pro token as long as it's within the law, and as long as you as a team are ethically doing right by your token holders and delivering value to them, then I think it's great. And I think people should release tokens, and they should build an awesome Web3 economy.
Totally echo that, yeah. So you are more Saudi than we are. And I had to throw this Saudi's story. Okay. So first of all, what was your impression when you came to Riyadh, and what do you see coming out of this region? And I really want you, honest vision, opinion, and based on the week that you spend, I think you spent a few days there in Saudi Arabia. Please share with us your vision of this greater Middle East and, of course, Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. So firstly, just as a bit of context, I came for the Outer Edge conference in Riyadh, and here there was a mixture of industry leaders and also some representatives from Saudi royal family and from NEOM and CAFT, and what I felt is there's a huge amount of potential in the region. So firstly, I was very impressed at all of the physical infrastructure that's been built in Riyadh. It's been a few years since I went there, and there's a lot of nice buildings coming up, nice restaurants, nice areas, places for people to live and have nice communities. And so, I also see that Saudi is welcoming a lot of business from overseas, which I think is a great sign, and I think that will spark a lot of economy and a lot of activity in Saudi. And I think that I was also pleasantly surprised that I was meeting a lot of people from Saudi who were interested in working together with Transak and finding ways to collaborate, finding ways to move the industry forward in Saudi. So I was pleasantly surprised with that. Having said that, there isn't a clear regulatory framework for buying cryptocurrency in Saudi yet, right? So we need to be realistic about that. And that's not an easy problem to solve. And so for Transak to operate in Saudi right now in the way that it does in other countries is not possible. So that's an obvious hurdle that we would need to overcome in order to get there. However, with the attitude that I experienced and the amount of interest that I kind of gauged when I was there, I feel like this is possible, and it seems to be being worked on. And I'm confident that in the next 2 years, some kind of framework will emerge. And we're looking at that opportunity, and we're kind of ready to move in when it does.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, Sharon, go ahead.
I think you need to start an office here right away, because it might be coming sooner than than you think. All right, rapid fire questions, one word or one sentence or less. All right, you have to pick between two options.
Okay.
Number one, BTC or ETH?
ETH.
IPO or ICO?
IPO.
Centralized exchange or decentralized exchange?
Mostly centralized for now, because DEXs are not good enough, but in the future, DEXs.
CeFi or DeFi?
Web 2.5. So it's like a mullet. You have DeFi in the back and CeFi in the front.
Awesome. Coinbase or Binance?
No comment.
Yeah, boss is clients. He cannot talk.
Finally, Riyadh or Dubai?
I have to say Riyadh, of course. I'm half Saudi. I have to say that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And you know that Miami and Riyadh are Jumle city. I think they have like a partnership where the mayor of Miami spend a lot of time also in Riyadh.
Yeah.
And I think they are some kind of how do you say in English, like Jumle city or something.
Twin.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a relationship between Miami and Riyadh in that regard. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's
So
make that happen,
interesting.
and you guys can come to Miami, and I'll come to Riyadh, and we'll build some connections.
Amazing. Well, Sami, it was great speaking with you, and really enjoyed the conversation. And looking forward, to you visit or us visiting. And we'll be at Consensus actually in a few weeks from now. I hope
Yes.
that to meet again there. Definitely,
Yeah.
I know that Transak will have a strong presence
We'll be
at the
there.
event. So, to my audience, if you want to meet great people, builders, founders, dreamers, come and join us at this event as well, and looking forward to meet you all. Thank you.